Fellow tennis nerds, today I talked to Conor Niland, ex ATP pro, reached 128 or 29, I'm not 100% sure, played Novak Djokovic at the US Open. He has written this excellent award winning book that I can recommend called The Racket about his life on tour. And it's very fascinating. You get really deep into that world, and we're going to talk about that today. First of all, how are you today, man?
I'm great. I'm jealous of you in the sunshine. I was in Spain last week, and it's actually okay here in Dublin today. But yeah, I had a nice few days in Spain with the family, so it was nice to get some sunshine. But yeah, I'm doing good. Nice to be on here.
So, what prompted you to write the book? How did you get that idea in your head after like a long career of just kind of playing tennis and trying to make the most of that?
Yeah, it's funny. I finished in 2012, and I didn't start the project till 2020, so it was quite a number of years, 8 years of time passed, I suppose, before I started the book, and I think that probably helped. It gave me distance and perspective to look back on my career. It wasn't sort of raw. The idea started actually with a small publishing company in Ireland. One of the guys in a publishing company was a tennis fan and reached out to me, and we went for a coffee. He said, "Listen, I think there's an interesting story here. Would you?" But it was a little bit more like a straight autobiography idea. And at the time, we just had our first child, and I was doing a master's and just really busy, and I couldn't commit to it. And then about 3 years, 3 years later, COVID happened. I had a little bit more time, and I started to write. I wrote a little article actually for a kind of a website, and it grew from there. One page became 10 pages, became 50 pages, and I showed it to some people who thought it was, really interesting and really good. And then I got a meeting with Penguin, obviously the biggest publishing company around, and they said, "We really, really like this, but let's make it a little bit more about the tour and a little bit less specific autobiography of me," which made obviously a lot of sense. So you're you're seeing the tour through my eyes, but it's not like the tennis story of Conor Niland. It obviously becomes that a little bit in terms of you're following my journey, but it's not, it's not just about me. It's about what the tour and that world looks like.
And I think the like you to really get interested in this stuff, it's nice to have a like a key figure like yourself. Like I mean, your feelings, your emotions, they really capture you in this book, right? Like you really feel your anxiety before some matches, like throwing up and when you go through like stomach bugs before playing Novak, and stuff like this. So
Yeah.
it's really fascinating and kind of you really feel for you as the main protagonist. Like it's not an easy life playing on the Challenger Tour and then getting up to the ATP level.
Yeah, you absolutely live in, even though I say it's not my autobiography, you absolutely live in my head for quite a lot of the book. But I guess I'm a representative of a challenger player, I guess is the best way to describe it. So, and again, a book gives you the time to really explore that and how I feel in a way that even a podcast, you can obviously get to a certain level of depth, but I think in the book you can really live with me in my deepest thoughts. And I go through the Wimbledon match when I qualify for Wimbledon, and go through that match and that first round in an awful lot of detail, not quite point by point, but you get to really feel what it's like for a player and what's going on in their head when they're playing a match at Wimbledon, or their biggest match they've ever played. Yeah, it was a great way to get to kind of explore what that player is going to feel like in certain matches, but also as they travel 30 weeks a year and try and figure out, am I getting into this tournament next week? Am I five on the list? Am I three on the list? Injuries, thinking about ranking, worrying about ranking, worrying about sponsorship deals, all the little things that you don't quite go on as a tennis fan, but maybe don't get to see it from the player's perspective. So I think it was a good opportunity to show that, and I think it's worked out obviously pretty well. People are really responding great to the book.
Yeah, and it's we've seen some parts of like behind the scenes pro tour with this Netflix show Breakpoint, and that's kind of feels a bit more manufactured, although it's like, okay, they're in the hotel rooms and stuff, but it's like well produced. This feels more authentic, and I think it's kind of easier to relate to in a way, because like it's you don't have like four agents that are running around and doing deals, and you have to do like some travel management. And I think people don't really realize, like, even very, very good athletes like yourself, on the highest level of tennis, kind of, they have to do a lot of administration and things that are kind of, yeah, like you're a self-employed person, like in your own little company that you're trying to run. It must be kind of frustrating at times.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Netflix documentary obviously focused on players who were well inside the top 50 for the most part, and even in the top 10. So for a start, you don't get to see the perspective of a guy who's trying to get into the biggest tournaments. So that had never kind of been explored or written. But as you say, you don't really get into the detail either in Netflix. Okay, they had some some interviews with the players in their hotel room after they took a loss, and of course they were disappointed and discussing details with their team about how they could get better. But it wasn't really showing it at the granular level where you're going straight from the match to the laptop. It used to be that there was like the kind of an internet cafe, because obviously I played back in the 10, 15 years ago, and you're booking flights and you're sitting there still sweating in your t-shirts and shorts, and you don't know whether to book your flight for to return or whether you're going to last a week or 2 days at the tournament. So it's like running a small business, to be honest, and a business that's kind of losing money a lot of the time too. And I had a sponsor for a couple of years after I finished college in the States, and I talk about feeling like that was almost like it felt like I was a charity case coming out of college. I'd been three in the country in the NCAA rankings, was obviously a very good player, and I go and join the pro tour, and I'm having to put my hand out for money, as opposed to every other sport where if you're at the very top of the NCAA rankings, you're getting a contract and a salary. And my actual career took a dip after I left college. I got free clothes, I had teammates, physios, coaches, hotels paid for when I was playing as an NCAA player, and I went on the pros, and I'm getting 7 hour taxis through Uzbekistan, and losing first round. So my lifestyle got worse when I went on the pro tour. So again, you get to really, yeah, experience that with me in the book, and kind of get under my skin a little bit.
Yeah, so you played, and as you mentioned, college tennis. Like, do you think that it's a good route for players that are unsure whether it's like, I mean, some are ultra talented or like really
Yeah.
spotted straight away and go straight onto the tour, but it seems like a more and more feasible route to go from college to pro, as we see it today.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's stood the test of time. I think 10, 20 years ago, um, they were producing players, and we're still producing, and it's still producing players. Jacob Fernley has just gone straight to the top 100, come out of college about a year ago. There's a number of guys and girls who are doing it. Um, I do think my rule of thumb is, unless you're like really competing to be winning junior grand slams, at 17, 18, if you haven't got a Grand Slam win final, semi-final in singles under your belt, you should probably be considering um, college. You should certainly be thinking about it, because it's really competitive, and you're probably not, unless you're, as you say, exceptional, you're probably not going to be winning that many matches on the pro tour at 18, 19, 20 anyway. And you can still go to college and take the summer and play and still keep a decent ranking, and then go. But I also understand how people want to not leave any stone unturned and just go full tilt at the pro tour. That's obviously what the guy in the picture behind you did, and Rafa and Novak and Andy. So if your dream is to win Grand Slams and you're at that level, you're probably going to be winning almost ATP level matches at 16, 17. So that conversation never has to come in. But if there's any doubt, then yeah, college is a good route. But I think you have to be careful where you go as well, right? Because college in the States is a very big concept, but there's probably only a certain number of colleges where you can go there and actually improve, and the environment is conducive to you becoming a professional tennis player, because There's lots of people in college who don't want to become professional athletes, and lots of distractions, and you can be having a lot of fun there as well. So you just gotta, yeah, be going to the right place too.
When you wrote this book, like there was, I mean, as you mentioned, quite a few years after you finished your career. Was it painful? Was it like, did you remember your career very fondly? I mean, you go into some detail, like you must have very good memory or some notes or journaling down, because like you really, even like matches where you remember the points kind of.
Yeah.
How did you feel about like looking back on your career after writing this book?
Yeah, so there were a couple of instances where I went back and watched video. So I went and back and watched the Wimbledon first round, went back and watched the Djokovic US Open match, a challenger final against Jerzy Janowicz in Salzburg was on video. Went back and watched that. So there was a couple of matches that I was able to obviously draw on video footage. A lot of it was just memory, and a lot of people have said, you know, how do you remember all that and the detail? I did I did keep some notes, but not extensive, and didn't actually rely on them that much. It's funny. I think because I was so kind of almost hyper aware of what was going on, I was so invested in my career. So much of it just is lodged like so clearly. So it wasn't easy, or wasn't difficult for me to remember what it felt like to practice with Andy Murray. I remember it really, really clearly, because it was a big deal. It was important to me. So there was lots of stuff I forgot, and that didn't make it into the book. But the stuff I remember was, yeah, it wasn't difficult for me to recall. But that didn't. And when you say was writing the book painful, I know you mean where was it bringing up tough memories and emotion, um, a little bit. But I would use the word painful in terms of how hard it was to to create a book. And again, any book, there's a team involved, and I had a great publisher, and I worked a little bit with an Irish journalist as well to help on some pieces, just to take a little bit of pressure off. But the actual act of putting your thoughts down, making it readable, making it all make sense, having a clear beginning, middle, and an end was hard work. And obviously fact checking, and you know what was the score, who did I play, all that stuff. Yeah, it was a lot of work, and it took, as I say, three and a half years. Not every day working on it, but thinking about it all the time. And yeah, I think actually it helped me move on. I think the Wimbledon loss, I say in the book that I think about that match every day, more or less. And it's funny, since I've written the book, I haven't thought about it as much. I think writing the book has been a real therapy for me. So that's been really a real positive.
Yeah, I can imagine like just writing things down is usually like a very good kind of mental training for you, right? To deal with things. Is this kind of like light a fire that you want to write more things, or like go into more books or way of other kinds, or more tennis?
Yeah, yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I think I would love to try again, to do something. I haven't a specific project in mind. I'm not working on anything at the moment, but yeah, like I studied, my major was in English at Berkeley, where I went to university. Um, and yeah, I definitely would. What that looks like, I don't know. Will it ever happen? I don't know. To be honest, most of the time I was writing this book, I didn't think it was ever necessarily going to get finished and get into bookshops and all that. So, but yeah, I really, um, again, enjoy is a little bit of maybe too simple a word, but I got a huge amount out of it, and obviously it's been really fun, to speak about the book and get so many great messages from people. So I would love to at least try and write another one. But it probably won't be about tennis. I think I've said all I need to say about tennis. But yeah, but wait and see. But yeah, I think it has given me a little bit of a taste for it, and I'd like to try it again. But we'll see.
And when you looked back at your career, was there anything that stood out to you, like, okay, I wish I did this differently or approached this differently, or do you think that's a kind of negative way of looking back? It's done. It was the way it was,
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. Like I think I talk about it. I say I don't think I maxed out my ability. My highest ranking 129 in the world. Um, I think I could have been a little bit higher if everything had gone slightly differently or a little bit better. But it could have gone a lot worse as well. And you play an awful lot of junior tournaments. Around the place growing up, and most of those players don't get to play the biggest tournaments. So it could have gotten worse. There's one big turning point in the book where I spent 2 weeks at the Bollettieri Tennis Academy in the late '90s training, and in the space of 2 weeks, I trained with the Williams sisters. I hit with Peter Korda, Andy Roddick, and at the end of the 2 weeks, they said, "Listen." It was in the summer. They said, "Listen, would you be interested in maybe coming back in September?" And myself and the guy I was there with, Stephen Nugent, we both sort of just didn't take up on it. Went back to Ireland and sort of carried on. And in the space of those 2 weeks, I'd had this incredible experience, but I don't think I realized at the time how beneficial it might have been to be based at a tennis academy and training 4 hours a day in the heat with some of the best players in the world. I know that sounds strange to think, how did he not understand that at the time? But I didn't, and it also felt like a long way away. Florida in the '90s was a long way from Ireland, pre mobile phones really, and internet really, and all that. So it was a bit of a big jump, and decided to go the safe route. And I think that probably would have probably made me a better tennis player. But also, there's lots of stories of guys who go off to academies and end up burning out and that. So I think that was a danger too. So yeah, I definitely think that was a bit of a crossroads. And I called it in the book the horrifying gamble of a tennis player, because sometimes that conversation is happening at the age of 10, 11, or 12. That a parent has a talented player, and they're going, well, I'm in some town in Sweden or Ireland or wherever, and they're not able to get the hours and the coaching that they need. So I'm going to have to send them to Spain or France or Florida at 11 or 12, and that is a big deal. Um, so that conversation is probably happening somewhere right now, somewhere around the world, and it's a tough one, because in football or rugby or ice hockey, whatever it is, you can generally stay reasonably close to home and get what you need. But in tennis, it's so international. Often you have to make that move quite early.
Yeah, and you have always had this kind of relationship with Tennis Ireland. Like, if you had gone to the LTA, which could have been an option for you, right? Like maybe life would have been easier financially because you get more support and so on. Is that something you think about, or that you think about today, or how do you deal with that today? Like the tennis in Ireland is a bit of a special topic in the book.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was born in England. I moved to Ireland when I was 3. So I had a British passport, and I traveled on 2 passports, because to leave one in for a visa to China and then fly somewhere else and come back and collect the visa. So it was practical for me to have 2 visas. But I was playing Davis Cup for Ireland, and I made my Davis Cup debut quite early at 18. So that decision was kind of made for me pretty early. But as I got older, I went, gee, if I declared for Britain when I was 16, I'd be main draw of Wimbledon right now, as opposed to when I was getting a wild card. I'd be getting a wild card maybe when I was 200 in the world, rather than having to go through qualifying. So yeah, it was tough in terms of not getting a huge amount from the Irish Federation when I was on the tour, um, until I was probably 27 or so. I'd never had a training facility in Ireland looked after, nothing, no coach sent with me, apart from maybe 1 or 2 weeks a year. So yeah, that's the big thing about tennis. You've got the 4 Grand Slam nations who've got so many resources, are able to put so much into their players, and then all the other countries are just trying to figure it out. And Ireland, obviously, not a big history, so it was definitely made it challenging. But at the same time, I think it was motivating for me to try and become the first Irish guy to play Wimbledon and do all that stuff in a long time. So it had been 30 years, I think, since an Irish guy had played Wimbledon. The last guy might have been Matt Doyle, who was brought up in the States, or Sean Sorensen. And so it had been a long time. So I'm happy I stayed with Ireland, but obviously there would have been opportunities if I'd declared for Britain that I wouldn't have got.
One thing you talk about in the book, which I find interesting, also having seen and been involved in different facets of the behind the scenes of tennis, right? Is the hierarchy, like this. Okay, there's you practice with Serena, Murray, Roddick, and all these players, and some players didn't even say hi because you were ranked 300 or 500 or whatever it was, right? So um, what's your feeling there? Is that something we have to change in tennis? Is this inherent in the tennis structure we have? Like you're blowing up this ego bubble because that's the only way you perform at your max, and it's an individual sport, so you create a lot of narcissists, along the way of becoming tennis players. Like, how is your thinking around that?
Yeah, it's weird because we're all we're sharing locker rooms and we're sharing cafeterias, but we're competing against each other. So there's a lot of posturing, and you don't want to be the first guy to say hello, and the guy walks past you, doesn't say hi back, and you feel like, oh, you feel like you've lost already. So I found that people tended to stay within their country group a lot. Okay, obviously there's certain guys who are just super extroverted and are able to socialize with everybody, or guys who've been on the tour for 15 years and just know everybody. But it was hard to be a newcomer into the tour. I found, and again, not with a lot of Irish guys on the tour. I didn't find it a very welcoming environment. If you were at a hotel in China at breakfast, at the omelet counter, and you've got a guy beside you in a tennis tracksuit, you guys have never seen each other before, you don't naturally say hi or strike up a conversation and say, oh, hey, I'm Connor, I'm playing in the Challenger too. You wait till you play each other in a match or practice together till you have a conversation. So I don't think there's a real culture in tennis of reaching out and being friendly. I do say that the very best players on the tour tend to be the friendliest, because everyone wants to say hi to them. So they just naturally, and they're already very established, so they don't have a lot of insecurity. Whereas the guys who are a little bit lower ranked have the most insecurity. So probably end up trying to look like they've got the biggest the biggest ego, um, when in fact they're kind of a little bit scared. So yeah, there's a lot of that. You say hi to somebody, um, they don't say hi back. You tend not to try again. So yeah, I found the culture of the tour, yeah, not very friendly. And you see it now even on Instagram. You have the UTS sort of page shows players having dinner together, and you kind of get to listen in. It's nice to see that sort of guard down and those guys being quite real and open with each other. I never sort of saw that side of things. I actually found myself tended to hang out a lot more with some of the doubles guys as well. Again, maybe naturally because we weren't in competition with each other. I just played singles really, and the double specialist guys we were never going to have to play each other. So I found myself becoming a little bit more friendly and relaxed around those guys. So yeah, it's not a place where you're coming to make friends. And maybe that's changed since I've been on tour, but I suspect it probably hasn't that much.
No, I travel around a bit on tournaments and go to player restaurants and stuff. And usually, like you see that their teams, like they're different islands spread out. So
Yeah.
he is with Oliasim is with his coach, and there's no conversation in between the camps. Like the camps are there, and only like you mentioned, which I thought was interesting, is like if you go to the locker room, there was like Tiafo and Fritz, they're talking, but nobody's talking to them from another country or whatever, because I mean they play on the same team, they play, so they know each other. But otherwise, it's a lot of posturing, is a lot of like, okay, there's a tense atmosphere in tennis locker rooms.
Yeah.
That's what I
It,
noticed at least.
it's draining, and actually a lot of the players don't hang around a lot. So they come, they practice, they maybe get their food, and they're gone. Um, they don't, because it is draining. Because, and like, if you walk past a guy in the locker room and you're playing him tomorrow, like, do you make eye contact? Do you say hi? How friendly should we be? Do we have a conversation for 10 seconds, for 30 seconds? Not at all. So it's like, it's say all these little social contacts are quite tiring, and it's interesting to hear you say that that is still happening. And also, um, these guys, like, at the very top of the game, they're playing almost exactly the same schedule. They're certainly seeing each other every couple of weeks. Certainly the guys playing the Masters series, whereas it's even more pronounced at say the Challenger level or the lower end of the top 100, where you could play, okay, maybe play Australia, Roland Garros, qualies, but between that you might be playing a tour in the US or Asia or Europe, and you don't see guys for a long time. So, yeah, it's hard to sort of strike up friendships, and yeah, it's hard to know how to change that, to be honest. But yeah, it's quite a it's a place of self preservation.
Yeah, 100%. I think like in some cases for the top guys, like Laver Cup has opened up a little bit of that because they're on the same team, but that we're talking about really top guys, right? So I've been to the Laver Cup when behind the scenes that the guys are, feeling like a bit of a team vibe, even if they don't
Yeah.
maybe love each other. So they're trying it a little bit, but on the lower levels, like slightly lower, like 50, 100, I think it still is a bit like what you describe in the book, which is very interesting to see, and also get someone who's experienced it. Like you go on a practice court. That was one of the scenes that really resonated with me. And then the guy doesn't even say hi, which is
Yeah.
it's like in my head it's psychopathic behavior, but it's just like the pecking order of that they're trying to kind of preserve. Like we're enemies at some point, So
Yeah, I know. I also think it's so hard to get out of the futures and the challenger world. And then once you get to the top of the game, let's call that the top 50, you don't want to go back. And so you don't. You know, am I going to go out of my way to make friends with some Irish guy who's 160 in the world? What's it going to do for me? And I don't want to be hanging out with challenger guys, and that mentality to come back. I've worked really hard to get away from that, so I don't want to necessarily go back there. And yeah, it's funny because like the difference between a player who's 40 in the world and 140 in the world, you actually have so much in common. Like you're so similar in terms of what the life you've led to get to this point. The actual level you're at in terms of tennis is actually so similar, but when you're in the tennis world, 40 in the world, 140, it's like you guys are worlds apart. Like this, you guys have nothing in common. This guy's a champion and you're a challenger. Um and it's funny because you'd actually have so much to talk about. You've had such similar lives and such unique lives as tennis kind of prodigies in a way since you were 5 or 6 years old. So yeah, it's a strange world, the
yeah,
tennis world.
it's strangely harsh. Like if let's say you're top 200 in football, right? Like you're like a millionaire
You're
and
both
living.
playing on the same team. You're both
Yeah.
playing for, yeah, whoever. Yeah, some Premier League club somewhere.
So
Yeah,
that's so different. So that's fascinating because tennis is a huge sport. There's lots of money. You can argue about like the distribution of all that money, right? Like the system of tennis is something I've discussed with a lot of ex players or coaches on this podcast as well. Is like, should we change it? Like, is there, because the future store that feels like it has to be a short lived period in your life. I mean, you have to get
yeah,
out of the future store, otherwise you might as well hang up your racket. Like that's a
yeah,
little bit the vibe, right?
yeah,
But it feels like it's so harsh the system, like that's okay. Then you get to challenger, and it's also a little bit like in and out. You can live on the challenger tour, but it's not like a nice life until you get to the ATP, and you get to some like quality, like at some grand slams, right? Like first rounds and stuff. But it feels like if we had like maybe a team system, or we changed up the tournament structure of some kind, or because of all the travel and stuff that, I mean, you wrote in your
yeah,
book like how much travel you had to do, like crazy travel. Like I go to Siberia, play challenger, then you have to like fly, like when you're tired you have to fly to another continent
yeah.
to play a quali or whatever. It seems like an insane structure for a professional sport.
Yeah, and you get used to it and you accept it, but when you take a step back, yeah, it's pretty crazy. And obviously, you've got that whole entry system and guys pulling out, so you're an alternate or a first reserve, and then you find out um, that you got in and you gotta go. And you might get fined if you don't go. So yes, the tennis structure it's a difficult place to be, unless you know what your ranking is going to get you into every tournament you want. So yeah, I would love to see 300 guys, 300 women, ideally making really good money as a tennis pro like you do in golf. And I know in golf it's even more players than 300. Um, but it seems to be very, very, very hard to convince people for that to happen. And I think originally, even the name Challenger, right? Um, that suggests that they don't want people to perceive this as really pro tennis because it protects the ATP brand, and that's where we're going to be um, putting our resources. And their obviously point is, well, nobody comes and watches Challenger tennis, so they're not bringing in ticket sales or TV. So how can we pay you guys the same? But I think a really healthy group of players between 100 and 300 is going to make the whole tour. I think a lot better and a lot healthier. And I think we're denying a lot of talent coming through in our sport um, by by making it such a small pool of players that are able to kind of enjoy professional tennis, let alone make an awful lot of money out of it. So yeah, it's we've still got a long way to go.
Yeah, I've noticed like if you go to challenger events, I mean, obviously the tennis level is fantastic. Like the players are incredible athletes, some great rallies, great entertainment. The issue mainly I see from my point of view, like is the marketing. Like there's no marketing. They don't talk about this tournament existing hardly in that local place. Like so,
Yeah,
if you have a local challenger, like it's great entertainment, but if you don't do any marketing, maybe the name, as you said, I think that's a great point. Like challenger, like they could just call it like ATP 75 or ATP 50 or whatever. The prize money ATP
exactly.
100. The prize money is
I think that would make a big difference, and to the players too, because they have the WTA 125s for the last few years, which I think really work. It fools me nearly. Never mind the general public. This is a serious tournament, which it obviously is. But if you present it as a sub tier, it's literally in the name. You were watching a substandard product here, guys. Just to let you know. Just to remind you, it's the Challenger Tour. Yeah, it's not going to get people super excited, but if you call it an ATP 100 or ATP 125, and that might be the biggest event you have in your in your city that year, I think people will come and make the effort. And then if it becomes a little bit more of um, a spectacle, that actually will attract better players to that event too. So you might get guys dropping down and playing ATP 125s that might only play ATP 250s. Um, so yeah, I think there's lots of ways you can start to make it a little bit of a bigger pool. As I say, like in the golf, you have a European tour, you have a PGA tour, you have an Asian tour, and they're all able to exist and attract TV and marketing money. Whereas tennis, there's one tour, there's one group of 100 players that make all the money, and that is it's an incredibly sort of small pool to draw on.
yeah, and it's also very transient because like I mean you can be top 80 and then you get injured and you're gone for 2 years or 1 year and then you're 600 or something. It's like tennis. You move around in the rankings. You go from 30 with you played Manarino in this book, and he's been like 150 and then he plays has a great season. He's 30 and then he goes
Mm.
back again. He's a bit of a yo-yo player, right?
But it's
And
even more it's even more difficult than that because I talk about it in the book. Or I just won my first challenger in August 2008 in India, so I got to like 200. So I'd finally gotten into, say, Grand Slam qualifying round level and into main draw of challenger level regularly. And then the next month, I hurt my hip, and I went to the doctor, and he took a scan of my hip, and this was September 2008, and he said, "Don't worry, it's only like a 12-week. You'll be fine. You'll be back playing in the new year. Take a couple of months off." And as he's saying it to me, I'm immediately thinking like, okay, so that's no points now between like, end of August to January. I'll be back. I won't have trained. It's going to take me a month or two to get back to my level for at least. So that's like 4 or 5 months. My points are coming off August. I'm basically already thinking about defending, and that's just a 12-week, because your points only last 52 weeks. I think in golf they last 2 years. So it's a really tight competitive thing. So if you lose 6 weeks, 8 weeks with a little bit of an injury, it can really affect how quickly you're moving up. So yeah, it's again, that's why you're not talking to the guy beside you in the locker room, right? It's all of a sudden you realize how stressful it is. So yeah, it makes it really tough.
Yeah, and you're right about that. Like how you check the rankings, like on your laptop, you're like, okay, I can wait to check the rankings if you have a good week, you know. But then,
Yeah.
like, if there's injury or a letdown, like, oh no, I'm dropping again, and then you have to qualify to tournaments you didn't before have to qualify because of the draw and the seeding and so on. So it's a tough one where you're living like on your number. It's like you're a number in tennis very much. It seems like than in many other
Yeah,
sports.
and your highest ranking is so important to you. My highest ranking 129. Again, always talking about the book, but in the book I say like if I see a clock in the corner and it says 129, I'm like, oh, 129. That's why it's always there and always will be, because it was so important to you. It so defines who you are, and if you're talking to somebody 10, 20 years after you retire, and they were involved in tennis and they ask you what your ranking was, you tell them whatever the number is, and that's they go, oh, okay, that was your level. So it's very much, it stays with you, and yeah, so it's yeah, it gets very very personal.
Yeah, it does. How close do you stay connected to tennis these days? Like, do you play like every day? Do you keep up, watch a lot of tennis? What's your involvement?
Yeah, so I am Davis Cup non-playing captain for Ireland. So we do 2 weeks a year. So we beat Saudi Arabia in February, and we play China at home in September. So yeah, it's nice. It's not my full-time job at all. I'm in commercial real estate now, but I'm obviously able to do a couple of training camps with the guys and a couple of weeks, but we don't have the budget for me to be full time. So it's nice, and my kids play a little bit now. I hit maybe once a week or something, but no competitive stuff anymore. So still involved, still love it. Yes, absolutely, still watch tennis. Have my criticisms and wish for the better for tennis. But don't hate tennis or anything. I want it to keep improving and keep getting better, and I think it can. I think it will. And I think my story will, yeah, show that the human side of the guys who are lower down the ranking, and showing um, that they really feel the pressures, that I guess we talk about in very general terms when we talk about how tough the tour is. So yeah, still involved, but kind of more from a distance and a little bit more part time.
Would you be interested in going into some kind of tennis politics role, like getting a ATP job or something to change the organization or the way the tennis works from inside, or the ITF or ATP or WTA?
Um, I mean, I'm living in Dublin. I'm in Ireland. That would probably involve, a move. And so no, I wouldn't say that's something that interests me that much. The tennis politics. But I think talking about this, I think the book will hopefully help. But yes, I think that world is. I don't know how much change you can affect actually, working at an ITF. They're such big organizations. So no, not particularly. But happy to talk about it, and hopefully kind of get the conversation going. And the PTPA thing is very interesting at the moment. It'll be interesting to see how that sort of plays out over the next um, year or so.
Yeah, there's some stuff going on in tennis, and I think we who love the sport involved in it in some way, like we want some change, but we want, it doesn't have to be super drastic. At least you see some progress, at least some changes that addresses some of the issues that the sport has, right? Because everybody loves tennis, wants the best, but you feel like all the money lands in one space in all the time. That's a bit of an issue.
Yeah, and we've been talking about it now for 10, 20 years at least. So I think the um, the people in charge kind of know, and I know the ATP have brought in this kind of minimum salary. So they're certainly making moves to show that they're hearing the message. Um, Obviously, the PTPA thing has now become something legal. Um, they've filed they're suing, right?
Yep.
Um, that is something that they have to now deal with. Um, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know exactly the ins and outs of it, but it's obviously enough. There's enough people out there who have a problem with how things are done, and I think everybody can see that there's too much money at the top of the game for there not to be some sort of better provision for players who are a little bit lower ranked. Your very top players are making, you know, hundreds and hundreds of millions, and the tournaments and the Grand Slams are making huge amounts of money, and supporting huge networks of staff as well. But you can only have 100 tennis players. I think just common sense. Everybody knows that isn't quite right. It's just about how to find the mechanism to get a little bit more money to the players. And as I say, we're not looking for 1,000 players here to be all on crazy money. But if we can just tighten it a little bit, I think the problem will. I think that'll start to go away, because I don't think it's been addressed to now, and the problem hasn't gone away yet. So until it does, I think there'll always be this tension.
Yeah, it's true. Let's hope for the best for tennis. Looking back at your career, like what would you put as your strengths and your weaknesses as a player? That could be quite interesting.
Yeah. My strengths, I was very consistent, very solid. I didn't miss a lot of balls, and I moved well. My forehand definitely got more of a weapon. I think that's why I was able to make the jump. I was maybe not getting enough. Yeah, I wasn't dictating enough probably in my late teens and early 20s. And I think from the age of 26, 25, 26, I think I really brought my forehand up to, really good kind of world standard. My weakness is my serve. I didn't get enough cheap points on my serve, and actually threw in some double faults as well. So my serve was definitely the one I think that held me back. There were periods where my serve improved, but then I was never able to sustain it. I did a little technical change at the end of 2010, but it really helped for a couple of months, and I kind of lost it. And yeah, so I think my serve. But yeah, I think there's usually, for anybody who's kind of in and around the top 100, there's usually 6 or 7 things that they do very, very well. And then there's the very top guys where they tick every box. They're 6'3", they've got a 130 serve, etc., etc. So I was probably missing 1 or 2 of those 6 or 7 things that prevented me from being a really, really top player.
Well, how important do you think like the mental part of your game is in tennis, and is it increasing in importance, or it was always kind of important?
Yeah, it's funny. I heard a crazy stat last week. I don't know if it's true or not, that Novak Djokovic has broken. I know he's been playing for 20 years, but he's broken like 60, 70 rackets or something. So he's probably our best ever player. And he's not like a total machine. So I think for me as well, I wasn't a total. I was, again, maybe certain periods of my career I was more solid mentally, and then maybe other periods where you're frustrated at whatever your situation, and that then affects your tennis and how resilient you are mentally. But yeah, that resilience and being able to recover from losses is super important. So I think that for me was that was a really big piece. Handling errors, again, is another thing that I think it's ironic, the very top players in the world are able to deal with mistakes a lot better than players, even amateur players, right? Or social tennis players get crazy at themselves for making a mistake. And it's like, well, you're not even a pro player and you're getting angry. The very top guys miss and no reaction. So I think I did a better job as I went through my career at being a little bit more beyond Borg about mistakes.
Yeah, Iceman. Yeah, that's sometimes a good strategy, and some players they like to have more fire. It's like a game of fire and ice in a way.
Yeah, and it's funny when you make your first outburst in a match. Once you make that first outburst, it's really, really hard to go back. You tend to get more and more frustrated. So you might last until start of the second set, and all of a sudden, if you whatever, throw your racket or shout, you might every 3 or 4 points, then you're going to do it. It's like you've broken the seal. The ice is melted. So if you can, how long can you stay composed in a match? And if you're tired and stressed, that it can be harder to keep that at bay. So that's all part of training and being a pro, I guess.
Yeah, on the cover of the book, there's a broken Babala racket. That was your racket for your career, like I guess most of it at least. Like what was your
Yeah.
racket and specification and string?
Uh, yes, yeah, exactly. That was funny actually. The publisher sent me a photo of their original cover, and it was like this racket that you would find, in your grandparents' house, under the stairs, like this huge head. It was like something, an older person playing club tennis. And I was like, guys, that's not a pro racket. Here's my racket. And they went and smashed my racket. Actually, that wasn't a racket I had smashed, for the photo. So I was never a tennis nerd on that stuff. I was, if it was the kind of the latest Babolat. I was with Babolat for my last few years on tour, and I was able to get rackets through them. So I can't even remember the name of my Babolat, but it's the one you see on the cover. And I was RPM Blast. My tension was really tight. Actually, I used too tight. I used to go like 59, 60 pounds. Um, I would sometimes go down to maybe 55. Would have been my absolute lowest. I think I might have been at 61 or 62 a little bit. That's why you see every photo of me from my career. I'm like, I'm like muscling the wall. So I probably would have maybe, in hindsight, I never even practiced for an hour with a 50 or a 40. I should have probably done a little bit more experimenting. And then I was like 350 grams, I think. So I went and got them customized again. My last couple of years on tour, I always just took the factory setting racket and strung it and played even till my mid 20s, and then I started to get it customized, and felt really nice actually. That weight and balance really worked for me. So I think it's about 345, 350 grams in the end.
Nice. Yeah, it's some racket nerds are listening, of course, but also many aspiring younger players. So it's good to get some advice from such a pro, and it's a great racket. I think it's the Pure Storm Tour. Being
For
a
sure.
nerd,
Yeah,
nerd,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. I never, yeah, I used a few different brands, a Yonex when I was in college, and I was Wilson a little bit, and the Babolat I always felt like, yeah, it kind of worked for me. I felt like I got a little bit extra pace for whatever reason at that time. I don't know if things have changed, but yeah, I was never hugely into the equipment thing. I think I should have been a little bit more actually. Um, and I think Manarino might be the lowest in terms of string tension, I believe. I see something in the 20s, maybe pounds. I don't know,
yeah,
something
yeah,
crazy.
22, 20. I mean, sometimes 25, but he has gone down to 22. I think. Yeah.
The next time I get my racket strung, I'm gonna ask the guy to do it at 25 and see how it feels. But yeah, I just was like, oh well, if the tighter I string it, the less mistakes I'm gonna make. That was honestly my mentality. And also I was playing. I grew up in Ireland, obviously, where the temperature is never more than like 12 degrees. Um, I'm having to muscle the ball all the time. So then when I went to play in the States or somewhere hot, I felt like the ball was really traveling on me. So I felt like if I went with a tighter tension, it was going to bring me a little bit back to my own, um, um, what my comfort level was, growing up almost in terms of the climate I was playing in. So I think that maybe played into it a little bit too.
Yeah, it's a generation. I mean, it's a change a little bit from generations. Like we're seeing now, tensions are dropping overall, and some players, like even top 20 players, like down to 44 pounds, 48. Those all are down. But there's still guys like Sinner who like 60 pounds. Like he's still up there, right?
Is he
Because
at
the way
60?
he's,
Right.
yeah. So
Okay.
it's
I
not
didn't know that.
unheard of.
Interesting. Yeah, and I wonder. Obviously the string change. I remember the first time I used, Lexilon Big Banger, and I just felt like it was such a big difference from I'd been using like synthetic gut. But I never changed my tension. And then yeah, there was just so much grab on the ball then with the new strings. That I guess that's maybe why. people are able to come down a lot more. Like this, I always felt like there was so much more control with those than there were with the older guts. But yeah, so I must experiment a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah. At least for your if you're hitting with your kids or whatever, I think you can try some lower tensions and see how it feels. It's quite nice, but it's not for
What
everyone. Like some
what would
pros.
you recommend for kids actually, like 10, 11, 12-year-old kind of good players? Should they be? I remember when I was that age, I was always around 55, just because that was what my sister's tension was, so I used to copy her. Is that sort of where would you say?
But they're playing like if they play a multifilament or synthetic gut, I think 55 is okay. But if it's a
Yeah.
polyester, I think it can be tough on their arms. You know, like rackets
Right. Okay.
or can be a bit stiff. So I just had like a strong 11-year-old I was dealing with, and you know it's like you can there are these strings now that are kind of half polyester and half multifilament, so a little bit
Right.
softer but still like give you some control, and that's then you can string it a bit higher. But otherwise, I would for kids I would try to get them to use to a bit of a lower because then they learn how to shape the ball more and they can actually manipulate the ball a bit
Right.
better. So it could be good to get used to that, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's interesting talking to you, man. I know you have a time to be out now, but it was great, very interesting, great book. Recommend it to everyone. I will write about it on the website. I'll do a review on tennisnerd.net if people want to check that out. But can really recommend it. I know people who are listening are tennis nerds, so I think you will find a lot to like and a lot to learn from this book because even on like the amateur level. I mean, we have everyone from like amateurs to pros kind of following some of the content, and I think like amateurs can also learn from your like how you deal with matches and you know things you went through in your career. Like you can really pick up some gems from that.
Yeah, thanks. No, thank you. It's great to be on. Yeah, like listen, it's a human story. It's a story of a guy trying to make it. You don't necessarily even have to be hugely into tennis, but obviously, if you're into tennis, it's a little extra, probably interesting. But I've had lots of people who in Ireland it sold very well, and yeah, people who don't follow tennis but like sport have taken a lot from it. So yeah, I feel like tennis people will, I think vast majority of them will certainly learn something. So, but yeah, no, great to be on. Thanks, Jonas.
Thank you very much, and you have a nice day now, and I hope to see you in Spain at some point.
Exactly. I'll look you up. We'll go for a hit. Good man. Thanks,
For
Jonas.
sure. Thank you.
Cheers.